Hello, welcome to Turning Back the Clock. I was thinking that there's been a lot of controversy about the waterfront, and that it would be maybe help if we took a look at what the waterfront used to be like. The museum has a lot of good photographs of waterfront activity, and went through and chose a few of them today, and I thought that we would talk about them and have a look at what was there before what is now, and maybe it will give some ideas for what the future use should be. The waterfront was not as it is today. The picture that we see now has Lakeside Park over at the very far right of the picture. Now you know from looking at that there was no landfill at that time, that the whole shoreline was little bays and little inlets and little sandbars, and moved along right to the bottom of Nelson, the very far west. It seems like the Indians used the various shorelines and sandy places along. We know that there was actually a small war on what everyone knows as the CPR flats in the early days. Old Indian woman told early settlers about fighting with the Kootenai Indians and the Lakes Indians over on the Groman Creek side. So we know that the waterfront was even a controversial thing at that time. As the first settlers came into Nelson, the waterfront began to be used as industrial, for living, for boat launching and boat building. And I thought if we started at the very west end of the waterfront, we would have a look at that. So down at the very west end of the waterfront was the slaughterhouse. The cattle used to be fattened up on Burns Meadows and brought down to the slaughterhouse. And at the very, very low water now, you can still see the bleached bones of those cattle on the shore there, down just over the bank from the transfer station. Moving along a little was the shipyard. The CPR, the Columbia and Kootenai Railway, and the Columbia and Kootenai Steam Navigation Company built the earliest sternwheelers and tugs that were used in Nelson on that early shore. Following on from that was a further development for the CPR, their station, and then their transfer wharf, which if we go to one of our large photographs, we will see where the barges were brought up to the wharf and the trains were driven down and put onto the barges. Then the tugs towed them away down to Kootenai Landing at the other end of the lake. Going on from there was a large empty lot which became used for a large mill. The W.W. Powell Company eventually took over that mill area. The match block factory that was there was also a place where women could work in early Nelson. There weren't that many industrial type of jobs with fairly good salaries, and the match block factory there was where a lot of women did find employment. Okay, moving on to our large panoramic photograph, we have a lot of the industrial heart of the city is shown in this large photo. You can see the smoke from the mills and from the smelter. The whole town was bright with this black smoke from the smelter and the mill industrial smoke. And when people made comments about this, they said that it was the look and the smell of money. And I think our attitudes have changed quite a bit. Moving on from there, you can see the large city wharf that was built in 1909, where the sternwheelers came in and picked up passengers and embarked and where the hotels sent down people to meet the boats. Moving on from there, you can see another of our early mills. This was the large planer and sawmill, which found employment for all sorts of people in Nelson. Until very recently, you could still see the remains of one of the boats that they used. It was covered up in the landfill for the streetcar. And a lot of old timers watched that boat, the Hercules, disappear under the sand that was brought in and the rocks for the landfill. Moving on from there, you come to the Walton's Boat Works, earlier Hale Boat Works, where the people had pleasure boats and pleasure boat building, and where they could keep their boats in boathouses and use Mr. Walton's repair facilities, and often, if they had the money, have a boat built there. Our Ladybird speedboat that we have at the museum was built at Mr. Walton's Boat Works. A few years ago, his wharf was destroyed by fire, and now it's also being covered with landfill. Moving on from there, the shoreline is almost unrecognizable because this is the area that has been filled for the soccer field and the parking lot for the soccer field and the extension of Lakeside Park, and of course the tramway now. So the waterfront right to Lakeside Park was very different, and a lot of people had little boat houses down on the beach, or they would have their boat pulled up onto the beach and would just go down from their house to the lake. And of course that era has gone now. A Lakeside Park, if we move over to it, was not always there. The park was originally around the corner below the end of 5th Street. People often talk about going over there to swim on that beach. But when the streetcar society, the streetcar company, decided to extend the line to Fairview, they sponsored building a park at what is now Lakeside Park. And it's quite fitting that our tramway be in Lakeside Park, because that was one of its original places. It was one of its original terminuses. And Lakeside Park, as we know today, was somewhat the same as now, but the water was always much less regulated before the dams, and the heights and low waters were very different. In my lifetime, I remember water in Lakeside Park at high water time, and I remember the sandbar totally exposed. I don't see any of those anymore. So the waterfront, as you can see, was very different. Around the corner from Lakeside Park was the shipyard. I hope one day we'll have as a guest Mr. Bill Curran to come in with some of his wonderful photographs of the shipyard in the days when his father was the foreman there. That is where the Nisukan and the Moye were built, and the Kuskonook, and the bigger and more prestigious ships. The shipyard over at the other end was too small and not a good facility, and so the CPR obtained more land over beyond Lakeside Park. Beyond that, which doesn't show in the photographs, was another mill and the Powell company, and we all have watched the thousands of poles pulled up out of the water as they've cleaned up the shoreline where the booming grounds used to be, because there were a pole company or a lumber company on that side of the very east end of Nelson for at least 100 years. So you can see that the waterfront has had heavy industrial use, been used as railway, and been used for pleasure. We still have those uses for the waterfront. Of course, the airport, our first major addition, was built under the initiative of community volunteers, and the far-seeingness of our mayor at that time, Mr. Stibbs, and named after him. And the landfills for the soccer and for the extension of Lakeside Park and for the Chockamaica Mall were also built as response to community need. The waterfront for the future, we are all anxious to see the results of the community plan and the uses that are going to be used. And I think that everyone feels that community use is really important, as the early people felt that the industrial uses were most important. The CPR, of course, had a large part to do with our early waterfront. The only way that they could see themselves able to expend the money needed to build into a town and provide the services was if there were going to be shippers along their railway line. And so when Nelson became the next place they decided to build, the CPR had its price, and the city developers in the early days were willing to pay it in order to have the service of a railway. And that is why, one of the main reasons why our waterfront has been mainly industrial use. Now we have other priorities in our community, and it's quite probable that the people aspect, which will be our future in tourism and in local people enjoying the waterfront, will be the priority that we'll need. So this is only one little look at waterfront as it used to be, but I hope it provides some background for you. And if you'd like to see any of these pictures again, you're perfectly welcome to come into the museum. We're on our summer hours now, 1 till 6 p.m. every day except statutory holidays, and we'd be very happy to see you.